Okay, so I think we've kind of touched on this at a high level. There is some drama between Aave in Aave land between labs and the DAO around certain revenue streams that seems to be questioning some of like the fundamental beliefs people have around what they own, around where value should flow, and ultimately, I think Josh and I were talking in the beginning here. It feels like much like these many teams build up technical debt, there is sort of this legal structuring, governance debt that can get built up in some of these early DAOs. I think we've articulated. I think Aave DAO is one of the prime examples of a very of a good outcome from a DAO, and yet they're sort of in this drama here today, trying to figure out some of these more nuanced questions. So that is sort of my absolute high level. I have not dove into the governance docs. I think Josh maybe did a bit of a perusing, but maybe Paper, if you want to just like set the high level here, and then we'll sort of trust your intuition as far as like what the most interesting angle to you is here for our audience.
Sure. So I guess a little bit of background. The current pitched battle kind of flared up when a member of the Ave Chan Initiative, which is a large independent delegate, so not backed by like VCs or whales, posted a question about a revenue stream that got changed. So the Aave front end had previously had a Valora integration that allowed people to like swap between their debt positions without having to like unwind everything manually and repay. It'll, flash loans involved. Anyway, big user experience improvement, and so it's something that's been on the front end for a little while. So that has been largely replaced or alongside it as a cow swap integration that does effectively the same thing for the purposes of this conversation, but the fees were a lot higher for the users than the previous integration, which degraded UX. And then the big question was, why was the money from this, the fees, why were they going to Aave Labs instead of to the Aave DAO, as had been traditionally the case with the Valora integration? So that's kind of set the stage, and things just kind of bubbled up from there. There's been some tensions over the course of the year about this. So I don't know if you remember, but back in March, when Aave Horizon, the
Right.
real-world asset market, was going to be launched, the idea was that Labs proposed that they launch a token to go with it, and that the DAO would get some small amount of it. I think it was like 10% of the token. And people were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, Labs backed down on that one. No Horizon token was launched, but I think it kind of lost them the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
And so when this came up, and I think the Stanny and the Aave team have not had very good comms around this, has really allowed things to escalate. And that's kind of where we're at today. That's like high level where we're at, is that the narrow issue was around this cow swap revenue. But it has now evolved into a bigger debate about like, well, if we didn't want Labs to have the front end, could we take it from them? And they're like, well, no, we own the like we own it because it's we built it, and there's disputes about what DAO money has paid for what, and that's where.
So what are like the meta? Like it sounds like there's two or three meta fronts here, for lack of a better word. Like it sounds like part of it's sort of around the IP. What are the other sort of meta
Yeah.
interesting pieces here?
So yeah, I mean, I think for people who are not themselves in the Aave DAO and don't want to get in the weeds, then the least interesting is probably the narrow issue of this Valora and CowSwap like revenue and integration on the front end. The big question that's probably more of interest to everyone out in DeFi and governance more generally, which is why I follow it. I work for GFX Labs. We are not a delegate at Aave, but Aave is systemically important. So
Mm.
it's good to know what's going on there. It's also one of the, I don't want to say it's the last man standing, but it's one of the last like real functional DAOs. And so to see it risk slipping into permanent dysfunction, that's something that we're following, and we hope this gets resolved to the satisfaction of everybody. But right now, the big question seems to be, where is the dividing line between Aave Labs, the corporation, and Aave DAO, the group of token holders.
And
Um,
can you maybe what is Lab's position there, and what is the DAO's position?
so Labs, so the DAO is in, if you look at the forum and on Twitter and in various channels, the DAO is increasingly aggressive about asserting, if you go to the forum, various rights that they want to see asserted on behalf of token holders around revenues. But like the really big one seems to be around the IP. And we even had the co-founder of Aave get on there last night and throw his support behind the DAO owning like the brand and everything. So, I think the hypothetical he trotted out was, let's say JP Morgan wants to come in and buy, Aave, the brand, right? And so what would happen? They would pay Labs, Labs would get a bunch of money, and token holders would probably not get anything, and he doesn't think that's right. So I tend to agree with that. So as someone who works in governance, I think that it's probably a good move to move the IP out of Labs' hands in the long run. And I think the sense of urgency in this situation is unique to Aave in that there's been these slow building tensions between token holders and Labs over the last year.
So what would that look like
Well,
in
hold on,
practice?
but I want to make sure I understand what the Lab side of that
Yeah,
is.
fair.
Yeah, so they asserted early on in the debate that they own it, and they have not really responded. Which I think is probably the correct move until they have either a counter offer or something firm to say. I think that's actually probably good. I know it's frustrating for the DAO folks, but I think as long as they're using this time to get their thoughts together and figure out what they want to propose as the compromise, then I think that's entirely appropriate. And I would even say, I think their Twitter handle has not handled this well, because they've been like in the last 48 hours, just like constant bull posts. Where, at a much increased cadence. And I think they would have been better served by doing what they're doing on the forum, which is just kind of taking their time to collect their thoughts and because this is a serious debate.
I've sort of seen a big defense, at least from the Lab side, of the value that the Labs has provided, which is probably very fair here. It's not as if they've been not working or absolutely essential to sort of like the evolution of this protocol and the success it's had. But I'm
Yeah,
not sure that ultimately gets to the underlying issue that people are articulating.
Yeah, and I think this is also particularly sensitive right now because we've just had a stream of these equity token holder situations over the last year as there started to be acquisitions. And I think token holders, there's always been some of these DAOs where there's always been a lot of tension, like Uniswap was classically one of them, though that looks like it's maybe coming to a resolution finally. But I think a lot of people now are feeling it because they have seen some of these acquisitions and acqui-hires, like with Axelar, with what was it, Padre, and there was another one earlier this year that's
Vector and Coinbase.
Yeah, where like the token holders basically, congratulations, you zeroed out.
Everybody's figuring out what the hell's the value of these tokens, and that's a fair thing to ask in a down market.
I mean, what are the power dynamics that exist here? Like it seems to me that the DAO doesn't, like the Labs entity kind of holds the keys here and can ultimately decide to do what they want. Is that not true? Or like how does the DAO like kind of throw some muscle around here?
I think this depends on the appetite of both sides for a fight. So Labs' initial response was that the DAO isn't an entity, can't own things. I am not a lawyer, but I will take issue with that. I don't think that's true. Unincorporated associations of various kinds, be they for-profit or nonprofit, can certainly own property. This is like generally the case in most developed jurisdictions. I'm not sure the Aave DAO would necessarily want to wave a flag and say, hey, we're an unincorporated association, one particular kind of which might open up token holders to personal liability. So I don't know if they necessarily want to go down that road, but it strikes me as not a very sophisticated argument to say, because you don't have a registered legal entity, that you don't have a legal entity. For example, my kid's little league team is they can own the field that they practice on and the equipment, right? It's just, without a registered entity, it becomes hard to interact with other entities like banks, right? And so what you typically have is an individual that will hold something in the name of some other entity, that, like some unincorporated association. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to get out there that was Labs' initial argument about why it has never been transferred. I also think we should recognize that it's entirely reasonable that this IP would originate in Labs, but I also think it's very reasonable to move it out of Labs and into either the DAO, or I think probably the best compromise here is a standalone entity whose job is an unopinionated entity, which the DAO and Labs are both opinionated. And they both obviously want assurances they're not going to get rugged by the other in 5 years when there's different people or different stakes.
I'm wondering if there's, I mean, the token grant to Labs, of which the Labs, I guess, was ultimately the source of that decision, I think is meant to be sort of this alignment piece that says, okay, we're all sort of aligned towards the same mission. Was that just not enough? Is there enough tokens to actually create that alignment? Or, I mean, it feels like maybe there's a failure here of like the fundamental beliefs around token and alignment in these organizations.
I really hate the term alignment. It gets used so much in our industry. So often, alignment is just another word for thievery or ruggery or bullying, and I don't believe that to be the case here. But it's a word I wish we would retire, because it's so often said by people with smiles on their faces and like a blackjack behind their back. They're going to whack you as soon as you turn around. So
Literal.
yeah, I mean, we have to be clear that the natural predator of token holders has traditionally been founders and foundations. So even one that has acted benevolently to date, like, I think it's understandable to insist upon protections and additional formal protections and ways to ensure that you're co-travelers going forward. I think that's entirely appropriate. I think that there's actually, I know I'm usually associated with being a critic of Sky and MakerDAO, but like, I think there's a really good precedent here that Aave could learn from, which is, long ago, the Maker Foundation set, back when there was a Maker Foundation, so like, which dissolved in 21. It had set up a separate foundation called the Difonden. It's just Danish for foundation. It's a Danish nonprofit foundation. The only thing this thing does is it holds the IP for the old original MakerDAO, not the current Sky ecosystem, but like the DAI trademark and stuff like that. And all it does is hold that and protect it from scammer websites or infringements. And it's not an opinionated entity. It's generally pretty passive. It mostly spends its time taking down scammer websites. I think that would be a really suitable solution here, because that would not really prevent Aave Labs or the DAO from using the name, but it would prevent someone from selling the name.
So do we feel close to a resolution here, or do you expect this to go on for a while?
I'm not inside the room where this is happening. So I am an outside observer. I know all the parties involved. My educated guess is that this will escalate until Labs makes some kind of olive branch, and then I just don't see an off ramp right now, because the DAO clearly feels aggrieved and ignored, and things are escalating. Labs really needs to come back with a good starting point for a discussion, and then work from there.
What's your sense? So I guess one of the debates around DAOs has been their effectiveness at actually building product, doing the hard work of actually getting something to break out and be valuable long term. and like the quick decisions that are required, et cetera. So I think we've sort of seen the evolution of DAOs over the years into more of like board structures than day-to-day operators. How much of like I guess maybe my concern around the DAO getting what it wants is that maybe Aave will be far less effective moving forward because of it. Is that a fair concern, or like can the DAO actually do what Labs is doing as effectively as what Labs is doing?
I mean, I think this kind of depends. People talk about DAOs like they're supposed to be. The purpose of a DAO is not to maximize the effectiveness, right? That's just the wrong tool. It's like saying democracy is to pick the best leader. It's not about picking the best, it's about avoiding the worst, right? So it's, it's about, forcing
Well,
an exit, right? Yeah, because, to run with that same analogy, and maybe we'll break the analogy, but like with democracy, you can cycle through shitty leaders instead of having one that rules for life because they're the
sure.
king or the
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And DAOs are similar in that they're not there to maximize efficiency. They're there to be able to prevent the accumulation of power and special favors and whatnot by specific parties. And to the extent that it can't do that, then it has failed. And this is why we see DAOs fail. It's usually because somebody gets a hold of the organs of governance and then turns them towards their own personal benefit rather than that of the project. I don't think Aave DAO is in a situation where if Aave Labs just said, you know what, screw you guys, we're going home, we're never going to work for you again, I think that would be bad for Aave. But I also think they have a bench of people already close to the project that could step in. And it's not like they don't have money to then bring in new people, new service providers.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue the bigger failure rate, especially for, I mean, the 0 to 1 here is that you just are not effective at actually building something. But obviously, Aave is the leader in on-chain lending, period, and definitely within the EVM world. And so, I think like the existential dynamics there that would exist if a founder or a core team left is far more muted there. So I think that makes sense. I do you have a sense of sort of like the community's response to I think is this BGD Labs put forth a proposal here saying Aave token alignment phase 1. Seems like this is like the first like counter or suggested solution to this. Um, uh, are people aligned with this? Is it like a good temp check for how the DAO is feeling, or has there been a lot of debate around it?
I mean, I think this kind of thing has legs until Labs steps in with something to offer as an alternative. It is important to complicate matters. Like BGD Labs is like a service provider that
Right.
is potentially able to move in to take over some of these duties and potentially be paid for that.
All right, I'm intrigued now.
Yeah,
Let's go.
but a lot of these service providers that are at Aave, they also began at Labs. So
Hmm.
there's these people all know each other. I would be lying if I said I knew all of the interpersonal dynamics at play. Um, but
Right.
I think this continues to just
And
move against Labs until they offer something.
what is like the gun to the head move here for the DAO? Can they just push something forward and make it so?
I mean, I think if I'm Labs, and this is my pure speculation, I'm probably sitting there thinking, do I think the DAO actually would retain legal counsel and pursue action? And to the extent that I believe that to be so, I'm very motivated to not get, even if you think you'll win, not get drawn out into that,
Right.
because it's just bad for everyone. To the extent that I think that they won't back down, either rationally or irrationally, then I'm thinking carefully about what am I okay with giving up. Because this is millions of dollars here.
I'm
Yeah.
curious what go
Go
just
for it. No, no.
I'm just curious what you think of the kind of broader exploration around token holder protections that exist today. We have things like MetaDAO and Future Key. We have people just trying to link tokens to equity through various models. I'm curious. I think you guys have been involved in, governance and Uniswap, Optimism, Arbitrum. Does this just feel like, yeah, kind of governance baggage that is no longer like the best thing to do in today's world if you were to start fresh, or do you think there's still merit to kind of these governance structures that exist in these more Lindy organizations?
I mean, I think the problem comes with mismatched expectations, right? So to the extent that people were sold a token and told that it gave them certain rights or privileges, well, if you don't honor that, then you're exposing yourself to fraud, right? To the extent that these were implied, wink and nod, then which is where a lot of this kind of ends up at the end of the day. You can't go back to some where somebody said that the thing did this or that or the other. This is where you're like, well, why do I hold this thing? And is it the speculative value that it will someday get value? Well, how? By what mechanism? And I think part of this is the hangover from years of token holders not asking these questions, despite people like myself and others shouting from the rooftops, if you don't have a legal or technically enforced right, you don't have a right. So in this case, the Aave token does have some technically enforced rights on chain, but that doesn't help you with like the front end or the trademark or anything like that. So the Aave token holders are actually in a much stronger position than, say, like Optimism token holders, right? They're, Aave and Arbitrum and Uniswap are kind of in this position where there are certain limited rights that the tokens can exercise if you have enough of them to vote something through. So every DAO is going to be a little different. But I think this is the question people have to ask themselves is, what are my rights? And if I'm just getting revenues, or I'm voting on snapshot, and if they feel like it, the founders will with the keys will implement the change, then you really, what did you pay money for?
Speculative narrative value, my friend. Like what all good crypto investors pay money for over the last little while, or maybe you're questioning as the prices are down. I mean, yeah, I find it interesting. I mean, yeah, there's. I was just sort of checking here on DeFi Llama. I mean, what we're seeing annualized revenue here in the sort of just north of $100 million. It's pulling in a good chunk of money every single day here, and so, and I'm assuming just a portion of that is what. Actually, I'm not. Maybe the labs revenue is not even included here on DeFi Llama.
Yeah, I don't think it's included here.
Yeah, there's the whole cow swap pieces. Interesting. Yeah, I sort of am in a similar boat to you, maybe not at the same level, but just know a bunch of the people that are behind this, and so it makes it interesting to watch because I have opinions and thoughts, and I think others probably have opinions and thoughts, and I think you're right that this is highly likely to get pushed to a fairly big extreme here before there's a resolution, knowing some of the personalities involved.
Yeah, and I think that's unfortunate because I think everyone in the DeFi ecosystem has a stake in this coming to a reasonable and effective conclusion, because it will then offer an example to some other organizations that are struggling with similar kinds of debates.
Yeah. I mean, we can solve all the legal stuff we want, but we got personalities involved here. So fucking human beings, man. When are the AIs just going to take over and run my life far better than I can, Josh? I don't know why people are afraid. I struggle on a regular basis to do basic things, and the robots do my dishes, and the AIs manage my financial and legal world. So I can just explore DAO drama on the internet. Like, come on, let's go. This is, yeah, man. I mean, clearly you're very knowledgeable about this stuff. So I think thanks to Dan for making the recommendation to reach out to you. I think we've been sort of tracking this, touched on it a few times. Don't think it's going away. I think it is. I think you're right. There's sort of like a bigger knock-on effect here that kind of tracks to the whole, like, what is real in crypto, that I think is sort of the existential vibe that is in the market right now. And the question around like the novel structures and businesses that can be built that are crypto only or crypto first. I think for us to get to that world sort of maintaining and growing, these are the type of questions that need to be answered. So, I mean, fuck, this is why I love crypto. It's just like let a million economic experiments run, and we shall see where we land. Interesting. Maybe before I let you go, I am kind of curious about the company you work for and your day to day here. You obviously, I mean, you've come across my timeline a bunch with good takes, or at least spicy takes. I think at least in my mind, I'm like, I mostly agree with you, and there's probably some things I haven't, and I love that about that's a good Twitter follower or follow from my point of view. But what is your business? Why are you getting paid to be interested in governance or following this stuff?
Yeah, so I work for GFX Labs, who most people know us for our governance work because it's just very public facing. I'm actually kind of the odd duck out at the company. We mostly run another reason to follow this debate at Aave is that we run a third party front end for like DeFi aggregation. So called OKU.trade. It's like swapping, bridging. It's got Morpho, so far, and a few other things. So my job is unrelated to that main product. We represent token holders that ask us to represent their best interests at DAOs usually. So it's kind of the short version.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you sharing some time with us today. If this goes the way that we both think it might go, I think maybe we'll try to pull you back on as the drama increases.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Favor.
Thank you, man. Peace.